Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be cracking over the book of Numbers.
Oh,
Yeah,
numbers.
the fourth book in the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
And, it's famous for all those, all the censuses that are in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you'll be surprised by what else we discover along the way.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating book.
It
A
is.
blend of history and law and storytelling.
Yeah.
It's whether you're a biblical scholar or just curious about ancient cultures,
Mm-hmm.
there's something here to pique your interest.
Absolutely.
Okay?
And I think we've got some thought-provoking questions to unpack together.
Yeah.
Like, how do historians handle those seemingly historical details
Right.
mixed with, well, let's say more mythical elements?
Yeah, right. Like, how do we reconcile those massive population numbers with what we know about desert living?
Right.
That's always a fun one.
Yeah, okay, so let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
What's the traditional view of how the Book of Numbers came to be?
So traditionally, it's been attributed to Moses himself, written during the Israelites' 40 years of wandering in the wilderness
Wow,
after they fled Egypt.
40 years.
Yeah.
Imagine being lost for that long.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
It makes you wonder if they ever circled back and saw the same landmarks twice.
I'm sure they had a few deja vu moments out there,
Probably.
but seriously, while there's that traditional view,
Okay.
most scholars today approach the book with a more nuanced lens.
They're not taking it as a purely historical document.
Exactly. They recognize it as a blend of potential historical events,
Okay.
mythology, and theological teachings.
Yeah.
It's like trying to sift through layers of history,
Uh-huh.
understanding that each layer has its own purpose and meaning.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Okay, so what about those famous censuses that give the book its name?
right.
Are we talking about a literal head count of every single Israelite?
Probably not.
Okay.
While they might be based on some sort of population data,
Mm-hmm.
scholars believe they served more symbolic purposes.
Okay.
Think about it.
Okay.
These massive numbers,
Yeah.
like 600,000 fighting men,
Wow.
they create a sense of awe
Yeah.
and emphasize the Israelites' identity as a chosen people.
Right.
A mighty force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, so it's more about establishing their place in the world
Exactly.
than about precise record keeping.
Exactly. And it also reinforces those themes of community, belonging, and even military strength that run throughout the book.
Speaking of those massive numbers,
Yeah.
it brings up a point that might have some people scratching their heads.
Mm-hmm.
How could they realistically manage that many people in the desert?
Right.
We're talking basic survival here. Food, water, shelter.
It's one of those things that, even for those who view the text through a faithful lens, requires a bit of interpretation.
Okay.
Logistically, supporting that many people in a harsh environment would be nearly impossible.
Right. Even with today's technology, it would be a massive undertaking.
Absolutely.
How do we make sense of that?
Yeah. Well, this is where understanding the concept of myth becomes really important.
Okay.
These stories weren't necessarily meant to be taken as literal, factual accounts.
Yeah.
Instead, they were vehicles for conveying deeper truths about their relationship with God, their identity as a people,
Okay.
and the challenges of faith.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the message behind the story,
Exactly.
even if the details might seem, well, a bit stretched.
A little bit.
But I have to admit, even with that in mind, some of the events in Numbers
Yeah.
can feel a little unsettling from a modern perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
Now,
There are definitely moments that make us pause and reflect on how much our ethical frameworks have evolved.
for example, the punishments for disobedience can be pretty harsh.
Yes.
We're talking about stoning, plagues,
Right.
and even divine intervention to settle disputes.
Yeah.
It can be tough to reconcile those actions with our modern-day sense of justice and compassion.
It's definitely a challenging aspect of the text. And it raises the question of how we, as modern readers, engage with those parts of the Bible
Yeah.
that seem to clash with our values.
It's almost like we're being asked to hold two seemingly contradictory ideas in our minds at the same time,
Right.
acknowledging the historical context,
Right.
while also recognizing that some of those actions would be completely unacceptable today.
Right.
Right.
It's a reminder that the Bible was written in a specific time and place, reflecting the cultural norms and understanding of the world at that time.
So it's not necessarily about condoning those actions, but rather understanding them as part of historical narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about approaching the text with both empathy and critical thinking.
Thinking about those harsh punishments,
Yeah.
it brings to mind another interesting aspect of Numbers.
Okay.
the portrayal of God.
Right.
There's a real emphasis on his wrath and punishment,
Uh-huh.
which might seem different from how he's depicted in other parts of the Bible.
That's a really important observation. And it's led some scholars to propose that there's an evolution in how God is depicted throughout the Bible,
Okay.
reflecting changing cultural and theological understandings over time.
So we're not necessarily seeing contradictions,
Right.
but rather different facets of the divine being revealed as the biblical narrative unfolds.
Precisely.
Right.
It's like we're getting a more complex, multidimensional portrait as we go along.
Yeah,
And that's one of the things that makes studying these texts so endlessly fascinating.
it is.
There's always more to uncover,
Yeah,
more layers to peel back.
I totally agree. Yeah. And you know what? That actually reminds me of one of the questions we posed at the beginning.
Okay.
How would the Book of Numbers be written if it were being composed today?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah,
If we were to reimagine Numbers through a modern lens,
yeah.
what aspects would stay the same and what would change dramatically?
Yeah, it makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah, and that's a conversation I think we need to dive into. But first, I think we need to explore a few more key elements of Numbers
Yeah,
as it exists today.
absolutely. It's fascinating how Numbers manages to weave together these grand narratives of divine intervention with the very human struggles of the Israelites.
Right, like on one hand, you have these like epic events like the
Yes.
manna raining down from the sky
Yeah.
to feed the Israelites.
Right.
Or Moses striking the rock and water gushing out.
Exactly. Miracles that seem to defy the laws of nature.
Right. But then on the other hand, you see the Israelites constantly complaining,
Yeah.
rebelling against Moses and questioning their leadership.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, we appreciate the free food and water, but
Right.
this whole desert trek is getting a bit old.
Yeah, right. And, those moments of doubt and frustration, those are the things that make the story relatable, even thousands of years later.
Yeah, because who hasn't felt overwhelmed or questioned things when facing seemingly impossible challenges?
Exactly. We've all been there.
Right?
And I think that's what makes Numbers so compelling.
Yeah. It's not just a collection of laws and genealogies.
Right. It's a story about real people
Yes.
grappling with real problems,
Yes.
trying to make sense of their world and their relationship with God.
Absolutely. And it's a story that highlights how people in ancient times tried to understand phenomena they couldn't explain.
Like those miracles we were just talking about.
Right.
I mean, from a
Okay.
scientific perspective,
Yeah.
it's hard to fathom manna literally falling from the sky.
Right. But for the Israelites, these events were proof of God's power and their special status as his chosen people.
So those fantastical elements were actually attempts to explain the unexplainable,
Yeah.
to find meaning and order in a world that often felt chaotic.
Precisely. And that desire to find meaning.
Yeah.
That's a universal human experience.
It is.
It transcends time and culture.
It's what connects us to those ancient Israelites even today.
Exactly.
We may not be wandering through the desert for 40 years,
Right.
but we all face our own challenges and uncertainties.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's so valuable to engage with these ancient texts.
Yeah.
They offer us a glimpse into the human condition, the
Mhm.
timeless struggles of faith, and the search for meaning.
And, it's not about taking everything literally
Right.
or getting bogged down in these historical debates.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing those universal themes
Yeah.
and allowing them to challenge us and inspire us and help us navigate our own journeys.
Absolutely.
As you're talking, I keep thinking back to that question of how Numbers would be written if it were composed today.
Yeah.
It's like we're being invited to reinterpret this ancient story through a modern lens.
Yes. How would our understanding of science and ethics influence the narrative?
Right. Would we still have those dramatic miracles, or would they be replaced with something else?
Yeah.
Something that reflects our current understanding of the world.
Yeah. And what about those harsh punishments?
Right.
Would we see the same level of divine retribution?
Or would we emphasize a more compassionate, forgiving aspect of God? It's fascinating to consider how those ancient themes would be reimagined for a modern audience.
It is.
And I think it speaks to the enduring power of these biblical stories.
It does. They're not static relics of the past.
Right.
They're living documents that continue to evolve and resonate with each new generation.
Exactly. And that brings us to another interesting question. What are the key takeaways we can glean from Numbers,
Yeah.
regardless of whether we approach it from a secular or spiritual perspective?
Right.
What insights can we gain about human nature, faith, or the human search for meaning?
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest takeaways is Numbers offers us a really unique window into the past.
It's true, we get to see how an ancient society grappled with questions of leadership,
Mm.
faith,
Yeah.
and the very nature of their relationship with God.
And while some of their customs and beliefs might seem really foreign to us today,
Yeah.
I think they provide valuable insights into the human condition.
You know, one thing that always strikes me is how relatable the Israelites are,
I agree.
despite the vast differences in our cultures.
Yeah, they complained.
Yeah.
They doubted.
They questioned authority.
Yeah. Sounds pretty familiar, right?
Exactly. It reminds us that certain aspects of human nature
Yeah.
seem to transcend time and place.
And it's through those shared experiences that we can connect with these ancient stories
Yeah,
on a deeper level.
absolutely.
Speaking of struggles,
Yeah.
I think it's important to acknowledge that some parts of numbers,
Yeah.
particularly those dealing with punishment and divine retribution,
Right.
can be kind of hard to reconcile with our modern sensibilities.
Absolutely. Those passages often spark debate
Yeah.
and raise questions about how we interpret and apply ancient texts in a contemporary context.
It's a reminder that the Bible was written in a specific historical context,
Right.
reflecting the values and beliefs of that era.
Right. And as modern readers,
Yeah.
we have to grapple with those differences,
Yeah.
engaging with the text critically and thoughtfully.
It's about recognizing the complexities of history, understanding that the past can't always be judged by today's standards.
Absolutely. And I think that's a crucial skill,
Yeah.
not just when reading ancient texts,
Mm.
but also when navigating the complexities of the modern world.
Right. Learning to approach information with a discerning eye, questioning assumptions,
Right.
considering multiple perspectives is so essential in this information-saturated age.
It really is.
You know, it's interesting how our conversation keeps circling back to this idea of reimagining numbers for a modern audience.
I know it is.
Such a thought-provoking concept.
It is.
What elements of the story would resonate with us today?
Right.
What would we change or update?
Would we still have those epic miracles?
Right.
Or would we find new ways to express the awe-inspiring power of nature and the universe?
And how would we portray the relationship between humanity and the divine?
Yeah.
Would it be a story of obedience and punishment?
Right.
Or would it focus on themes of love,
Yeah.
forgiveness, and growth?
I think those are questions worth pondering.
They are.
As we continue to engage with these ancient texts and find new meaning in their timeless wisdom.
So as we wrap up our exploration of the Book of Numbers,
Yeah.
what's one final thought-provoking question we can leave our listeners with?
How about this? Imagine you're tasked with writing a modern-day version of Numbers.
Oh.
What stories would you include?
Oh,
What messages would you want to convey to future generations?
that's a fantastic question. It challenges us to not just passively consume these stories, but to actively engage with them,
Yes.
to find our own meaning, and to perhaps even contribute to their ongoing evolution.
Absolutely.
And who knows, maybe by reimagining these ancient narratives, we can gain a fresh perspective on the challenges and opportunities of our own time.
I think so.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this fascinating journey through the Book of Numbers.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
Yes.
Until next time.